I went to Tennessee in '69. Winston was only 100 miles away over in Cookeville, and we became friends. I guess through the Midwest is where we met.
That's right.
We met in Chicago.
But in the spring of '70, at Easter weekend, he and I and Jim Garrett and Dave Keene,
who was teaching
in North
tuba
Texas,
at North Texas at that time.
we all met at Tennessee Tech at Winston's place, and we partied for the whole weekend, and we played quartets. And we all brought all this manuscript stuff that we had, our own arrangements mostly, and we read stuff. We photocopied everybody's stuff. Was it photocopy in those days, or was it mimeograph?
Remember that blue stuff?
Okay. Well, anyway, we went home with it. We each had 100 charts, and I was able to start a tuba ensemble because of it. He had already had one, and Connie Weldon had one, and Dan probably did by that time too.
I've been doing a tuba symposium since 1968. I think it was the first time that I had a tuba symposium. Dozen or so, then each year 30 or so, ended up being 100 or so. And Harvey found out about this. I'm not sure what particular point that I was doing this. I call it the tuba symposium. And this was pre-TUBA, and it was pre any of the international things. Harvey found out about it, says, man, that just sounds great. I'm coming. And I said, well, Harvey, I just don't have any funds, man. We just do this, He says, I don't care, I'm going to be there. And so for the next 20 years he came. Then Dan found out about it, and we started inviting Dan down. And so Harvey and Dan were just permanent guests at that. And then we started getting Brian Bowman in, and various euphonium artists and things. And for years and years, this went on for 20. We're still doing it.
And you remember
40-something years later.
We had Michael Lind was a student here.
Oh, yeah.
Chitati Kagawa. We flew him in. You'll see pictures on my wall. And that's how that got going in Japan. And to spin it off of that, Michael Lind was, I want to talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But anyway, that's a really good thing. That's how we started to go over to Europe. Now, one thing I'll tell you about the Europeans, I mean, there was a lot of resistance, and they formed their own little one, the German tuba form, which is fantastic, but at that particular time, there was a lot of Americans in their country playing tuba, and these guys were good, it was a little bit of, it was hard to get them convinced that, hey, we don't need a foreigner doing this, and we can do well for ourselves, and that was basically the attitude. But to guys over there like Michael Lind and Ducci and Chitati, still, they have the biggest, the HETA organization in Sapporo is one of the biggest, they have more members than anybody, and they have these symposiums going all the time, which show up, that's how that got going in Europe, Always wanted that international ring. And
how does the three of us met again? You reminded me last night.
Well, everything was in Chicago. After we got all this going, all this stuff centered around the Midwest Clinic, because everybody was going to the Midwest Clinic. Why? Because we knew Bill Bell was there, we knew Arnold Jacobs was there.
And lots of beer.
And lots of beer, and
contacts. We got
and Berghoff's.
Yeah. And Berghoff's, right.
Yeah, or Miller's Pub. So, that's what drew everybody into Chicago. So, well, that's the most logical place to have these original meetings. So, even though Jim was 100 miles away from me, we met in Chicago, But then from then, of course, from then on, we were back and forth all the time. And we met Danny at that point too. This is like 68, 69, 70.
Well, I had met him before he was famous.
Yeah, right. But that's the early days.